There's a strange moment that happens to some people in adulthood. A completely normal conversation ends. Nothing dramatic happened. Nobody yelled. Nobody insulted them. But 6 hours later, their chest suddenly feels heavy. Now they're angry, or hurt, or ashamed, or emotionally exhausted. And the terrifying part? They don't even fully understand why. One woman described it like this: "It feels like my emotions arrive late, like my soul is buffering." That sentence stopped an entire therapist's office cold, because for millions of people, that is exactly what childhood trauma feels like in adulthood. Not dramatic movie-style trauma, not obvious abuse, but subtle emotional conditioning that quietly rewires the nervous system for years. And the strangest part? Many survivors think their reactions are just personality flaws, until they discover thousands of other people experience the exact same thing. A woman named Oprah Winfrey once revealed something disturbing about her childhood. As a child, she was physically abused repeatedly by family members and relatives. But what affected her deeply wasn't only the violence. It was the emotional confusion afterward. She explained that she learned to disconnect from her feelings in real time. During painful moments, she became emotionally numb. Then later, sometimes hours later, the emotions would flood back violently. That pattern followed her into adulthood, and psychologists today call this emotional delay, a trauma response strongly linked to dissociation and hypervigilance. When children grow up in unstable emotional environments, the brain often prioritizes survival over emotional processing. The nervous system says, "Deal with the danger first, feel later." That's why many adults automatically say it's okay when someone hurts them, then suddenly feel devastated later that night. The body stores what the conscious mind postponed. This is why trauma survivors often struggle to identify emotions quickly. Because as children, identifying emotions wasn't safe. The child learned, stay alert, keep peace, don't react, don't become a problem. And years later, adulthood becomes emotionally confusing. One sentence from a partner can ruin an entire evening, but the person doesn't know why until hours later. And this creates another hidden symptom: rushing through life. Princess Diana spoke openly about feeling emotionally unsafe for most of her life. People saw elegance, beauty, and confidence. But internally, she described overwhelming anxiety and emotional emptiness. Friends close to her noticed something unusual. She constantly rushed. Not physically only, emotionally, relationally, even spiritually. Trauma survivors often live as if something terrible is about to happen. This is called chronic hyperarousal. The nervous system becomes addicted to emergency mode. That's why some people cannot relax during peaceful moments. Silence feels suspicious. Rest feels dangerous. Even happiness feels temporary. The body keeps waiting for the next emotional attack. And psychologically, this creates what experts call anticipatory anxiety. The person lives ahead of the present moment, always preparing, always fixing, always hurrying. Some trauma survivors even panic when they're doing nothing productive, because childhood taught them that safety had to be earned. A child raised around criticism, alcoholism, rage, or emotional unpredictability learns something devastating. If I stop performing, bad things happen. That belief quietly follows them into adulthood. And then comes one of the darkest trauma symptoms of all: depression that doesn't feel like depression. Robin Williams made the entire world laugh. But behind the humor was a man carrying deep emotional pain for decades. People close to him often described a sadness beneath the comedy, a kind of emotional exhaustion hiding under brilliance. Many trauma survivors experience what psychologists sometimes describe as functional depression. They work, smile, post online, make jokes, pay bills. But internally, there's emotional numbness, a quiet heaviness that never fully disappears. Some people have lived with it since childhood, so they assume it's normal. like a refrigerator buzzing in the background for 20 years. Eventually, the person stops hearing it. Until one day, they suddenly realize, wait, other people don't feel like this all the time? That realization changes lives, because trauma survivors often normalize emotional suffering, especially when their childhood environment constantly minimized emotions. Children who were ignored emotionally often become adults who ignore themselves emotionally. And this creates another strange trauma response: laughing while describing painful experiences. A comedian once told a story during an interview about his father violently screaming at him during childhood. The audience laughed because he told it humorously. But halfway through the story, the interviewer suddenly stopped smiling. Because the story wasn't funny. It was horrifying. This is extremely common among trauma survivors. Psychologists sometimes view humor as a defense mechanism. More specifically, adaptive masking. The nervous system learns to package pain in socially acceptable ways, because direct vulnerability once felt unsafe. So instead of saying, "My childhood devastated me," the person says, "My family was crazy, haha," and everybody laughs. But inside, the inner child is still bleeding. This is why trauma survivors often feel lonely even in social settings. People know their stories, but not their pain. And then, another symptom quietly appears: being terrified of attention. Adele once admitted that before performances she experienced intense panic attacks, severe enough to make her physically ill. This shocked people, because on stage she looked powerful. But trauma survivors often struggle deeply with visibility, not because they're weak, because attention once felt dangerous. Children raised in hypercritical homes become adults who associate visibility with attack. Being watched feels unsafe. Being noticed feels risky. Being emotionally exposed feels catastrophic. This is why some adults freeze during presentations, or panic when everyone sings "Happy Birthday" to them, or mentally shut down when asked personal questions. Their nervous system interprets attention as threat. And this reaction often comes from years of emotional invalidation, especially phrases like, "Look at me when I'm talking to you," "Stop crying," "What's wrong with you?" "Why are you so sensitive?" These moments train the child's brain to fear emotional exposure, and years later, the adult still reacts to visibility with anxiety. Then comes one of the most painful trauma symptoms: sideways grief. Keanu Reeves lost his child, then lost the child's mother, then lost one of his closest friends. People often describe him as unusually gentle, quiet, and emotionally observant. Trauma changes how grief behaves inside the nervous system. Sometimes the grief doesn't come out directly. It leaks sideways. A commercial suddenly causes tears. A stranger being kind feels overwhelming. A small inconvenience creates explosive anger. The person thinks, "Why did I react so strongly?" Because the nervous system is carrying years of unprocessed emotional weight. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional displacement. The trigger is small, but the emotional reservoir underneath is enormous. This is why unresolved childhood trauma can create disproportionate reactions in adulthood. The reaction isn't about the moment only. It's about everything connected to it emotionally. And finally, one of the most destructive trauma patterns of all: waiting to start living. I'll heal later. I'll leave once things improve. I'll change when I feel motivated. I'll rest after success. This is called mood-dependent behavior, and trauma survivors fall into it constantly because childhood trained them to wait. Wait for parents to calm down. Wait for love. Wait for safety. Wait for approval. Wait for life to finally begin. But healing begins when the adult self stops waiting for emotional permission. That's the turning point. Not becoming fearless, not becoming perfect, but finally understanding something powerful. These reactions are not proof that you are broken. They are proof that the nervous system adapted to survive environments it should never have endured. And the beautiful truth is this: what was learned emotionally can also be healed emotionally, slowly, patiently, safely. One honest conversation, one boundary, one moment of self-respect at a time. Because healing is not becoming someone new. It is finally becoming someone who feels safe enough to be themselves. And maybe the strangest part of all this: many people spend their entire lives believing their trauma responses are unique, until one day they hear somebody explain them perfectly, and suddenly they realize, I was never crazy, I was carrying pain silently. So now I want to ask you something genuinely important. What is one normal behavior you had for years before realizing it might actually be connected to childhood trauma? Write it in the comments. Somebody reading your answer may finally feel understood for the first time in their life. The moment a narcissist realizes they can't control you, they try one final dirty trick. And the video now on your screen may reveal exactly what it is. Watch carefully, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe.